And welcome to First Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, we're going to break down Holly Holm back in a main event once again, this time against Mayra Bueno Silva coming up on Saturday night. But before we get to that, let's take a look back at UFC 290. Two title fights, of course, were on the tab there on Saturday night. We have a new champion at 125 pounds as Alexandre Pantoja beat Brandon Moreno once again via split decision. I was a little surprised it was a split decision. In my mind, he did win that fight against Brandon Moreno, and then Alexander Volkanovski, and still in the featherweight kingpin, he keeps rolling on of his destruction of Yair Rodriguez in the third round via KO, TKO. So very impressive from Volk as he remains in the discussion for best pound-for-pound fighters in all of the world. But let's bring in Nick Kalikas. Does a great job of setting fight odds out there. That's why you can follow him on the Twitter handle of Fight Odds. Of course, a great job as a Bentley analyst. You can see him at UFC Fight Pass, Karate Combat, and also seen on UFC Online and the Gambler's Perspective, a great show that I've had the good fortune of being on. Nick, great to have you back on, my friend. Let's talk about this main event because it feels like in 2023, if I told you that Holly Holm would be headlining an event and she's a solid favorite, seeing about minus $1.70. It's come down a little bit to $1.55. Would you have believed it that Holly's still going strong here in 2023?
Yeah, she's a special athlete, man. So I know a lot of people are surprised, and she moves the needle. That's why you're seeing her in this placement in the main event. I mean, people do tune in to watch Holly Holm. She's a legend of the sport, one of the best female combat practitioners ever of all time, whether it's boxing and in mixed martial arts, of course. So she deserves recognition. Whatever people might say, I know there's some haters out there saying, oh, man, we're good to see Holly Holm. She's been around for a while. But the truth is, man, she still moves the needle. She attracts a lot of attention to the fights, and she's still competing at a very high level.
And that's the thing, Nick, right? It's right now, to get back in the Bantamweight title picture, I know Mayra Bueno Silva is going to look at this and say, if I beat a Holly Holm and put that on the resume, that gets me a shot closer. But for Holly, I think she looks at it like this is the last run. It feels like she's on a better run. Is the key, obviously, to a Holly Holm victory to stay on the outside, use her reach, that she has a 3-inch reach advantage, and try not to make this a wrestling match, keep it standing in a kickboxing event, and that's where she shines.
Yeah, but you know what? I think she is losing a step on the feet a little bit. She's more hittable than she was. She's not as effective as she was either. So I think, honestly, she's turned into more of a grinder, a wrestler, grappler. You know what I mean? She wants to grind people out. That's her path to victory as of late. So I think here she's going to try to do the same thing and try to stay out of trouble. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense because Bueno Silva has a great ground game, good submissions, of course. That's how she finishes a lot of her fights. But Holly Holm is still, I think, capable enough to maybe get those takedowns and avoid that game. So clinch, make this a dirty fight, clinch her up against the cage, just not really keep too much space. If you are, obviously, you want to make sure that she's on the move and, utilizing that reach like you said. But this is going to be interesting because I don't think Holly Holm on the feet is what she once was.
What's amazing here, Nick, when you look at the props, right, for the total rounds, 4.5, juiced almost to 2-1, minus $1.95 right now. So that leads you down the primrose path that it could be a decision. Holly Holm via decision is plus $1.20. Mayra Bueno Silva via decision is plus $3.50. Are people sleeping on the possibility of a finish inside of 4.5 rounds here where there's plus money at plus $1.60?
I think so, a little bit. I mean, but it's correlated to the dog. So if Silva wins, it's probably going to be inside the distance. If Holm wins, that's why you're seeing it, trickle a little bit more leaning towards the over because it is kind of correlated that way. Again, I just don't see Holm being that electrifying finisher anymore. But Bueno Silva has some pop. Even though she's not known to be a dynamic striker, she does have some explosiveness on the feet. And then again, she finishes people on the ground. So if it goes under, it's because we have an upset win, I think. And if it goes over, it's because Holm kind of did what she had to do. She grinded her out and won a decision, a very close, competitive, ugly type of decision, I think, is the right thing to say.
So again, if you don't want to lay the $1.55 on Holly Holm, you could go via decision according, if you're following Nick's, and I'm picking up what you're putting down there, plus $1.20. If you like the Holm side, if you like the Silva side, maybe you do want to look to that under a little bit here and you can get some plus money there if she can get a finish. Because you know how it is, Nick. Once it goes to the cards and you got somebody going to the Hall of Fame, not saying that sometimes you get skewed, but that has happened, right? And that would be the danger if you're backing the dog and it hits the cards.
Absolutely, man. And we see these judges be all over the place continuously. So, yeah, you're always sweating a decision. No matter how easy you think it was for you, It's never easy when the card's red.
Yeah, ask the Pantoja people last Saturday night at UFC 290. They were sweating it out with a split decision winning over Brandon Moreno. Albert Durev's back in there against Jung Young Park. We're seeing right now Park is a solid favorite here in the co-main event. What do you make of this fight here, Nick? And do you expect to see these lines move? Right now, $1.55 on Park. Durev right now plus $1.35 is the dog.
I think it's fair. We haven't seen a lot of movement yet. So it is a difficult fight to bet because both these guys, honestly, are a little bit up and down. I mean, Duryev, we expected a lot better from him. And, and, you know, he came back and won a solid fight over Chidan Jaquani in his last fight, which is not an easy, feat to win. So that's a solid win, solid bounce back, even though it was close and competitive. But I still think they're flawed. I mean, they show too many signs of, just being inconsistent with their performances, whether it's cardio, whether it's defensively. So this is probably lined about right. I mean, Park has some decent takedown defense, has a little bit of pop on the feet. It's going to be a very competitive fight. It's hard to lay the chalk, though, in this spot. I think you're going to see it's a dog or pass situation, despite kind of the lackluster performances on each side. It is a lot of people that I've talked to kind of lean the Park way, but I'm just not seeing the number move that way in that direction. I think it's a dog or pass situation, but not a fight that I'm tempted to kind of look at deep, to be honest with you.
When you see, again, for total rounds 2.5, it's juiced to $1.40. Not unreasonable here if you think it's going to get over that 2.5 round prop there, which says if it goes the distance, you do have to lay a little bit of juice at $1.35. Nick, do you get into the situation because judging has been so up and down that if you really do think that a fight's going to go the distance, sometimes you just, over the course of time, if you're on the dog side for more fights that hit the cards, you've got the better shot sometimes of getting that proper side of ROI if you're backing the dogs in fights that you think might go the distance.
Yeah, there's something to that for sure. I mean, you'd rather be sitting on the dog side in close decisions for sure in a situation like that. So I think there is something to it, especially as wild as the decisions have been as of late. You got to kind of factor that in a little bit. But it's hard to just kind of rely on that sort of factor, right? I mean, you have to still stick with your guns and stick with what you think is going to play out right, and then just hopefully the judges get it right. But I do think there's something to what you just said for sure.
Yeah, so again, just keep that in the back of your mind, people, when you're backing these things, if you do forecast these fights to go the distance, because then you really do have to hold your breath. We got the big ticket back on this card here. Walt Harris back against Josh Parisian here. What do you make of Walt? It's been an absence here. He is 40 years old now. I want to say 40 years young, Nick, from my perspective here, but kind of one of those up and down careers for a guy like Walt Harris, just 13-10 overall. He is still backed as a favorite in this spot at $1.65. Do you think that's aligned properly?
It's tough with him because he's been out for a while, and he's one of those fighters that can go out there and just finish the job in under a minute. I mean, he's so explosive, so powerful, and especially in round one, he's so dangerous that he can go out there and basically hang with anybody early on in the heavyweight division. It's just what you get after that fact. After, he gets maybe out of round one, if you can survive it, then he kind of falls apart a little bit as the fight goes. Parisian's been tough, man. I mean, he's not an easy out in the heavyweight division either. But again, it's going to be the early onslaught from Walt Harris. I think that Parisian has to kind of weather that storm, and then he could probably win this fight. The action at the sportsbooks has been pretty funny because we did see some love on Walt Harris early on, but now the market is dropping, and there has been sharp opinion coming in on the dog side of things on Parisian. So this is an interesting spot. I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed if Walt goes out there and just sparks him early because, again, the value seems to be on the underdog right now, but Walt Harris is explosive enough to get him out of there so quick that, again, I think it's lined right. Walt Harris as a slight favorite. I mean, he should be a bigger favorite in this spot, truthfully, but you just can't depend on him and trust him because of his inconsistency. Because, again, he's coming off a layoff. He's had all those personal demons he's had to battle through, which you can respect. I know it hasn't been an easy situation in his life with, the daughter situation. Sure. There's just so much going on. But the good thing is I do like to see him kind of with John Jones recently coming back and getting that W or whatever. He was kind of involved. So at least there's that to it. There's some positivity there. And I think Walt Harris is one of those fighters that could definitely shine and have a highlight reel to up and knockout. But at the price, you can't lay 160 on him right now, not at this spot.
No, and I'm with you, Nick. I've talked to Walt many times through the years. You really feel for the guy personally on a personal level. Good to see him back in there. Hopefully the mentality's back where it needs to be to try to get that victory in the octagon. You mentioned maybe he can go out there early at 40 years young. You don't want to go out there, maybe get into a grinder. You can understand why now. It's right there at a round and a half and just $1.10 to go the over here. So correlated play here. If you like the big ticket, maybe gets it done earlier. And if you like Josh, maybe you think that fight could get extended. Is that kind of a correlated possibility here? I
do think so. I think, like I said, if he makes it into round two, then Parisian's going to probably be live. It's going to be close though, man, because Parisian might be able to finish him, but around that spot. So I think the total's kind of tough where it's at right now too.
Give me a fight here, Nick, on the card. I'm looking at Nassim Sadikov against Terrence McKinney. McKinney really burst on the scene in the UFC, coming out of Chicago, back in my Chicago days. And, he's hit some rough patches. This happens in your professional career. And now he's a dog. I'm seeing about plus $1.25. What do you make of McKinney in a possible bounce back spot?
So dangerous. Talk about explosive. I mean, again, the first few minutes of that fight, I mean, if you could weather the McKinney storm, you're probably going to be okay. But that's the problem with McKinney too, man. He needs to get that defense and that conditioning. I mean, it seems to be a little theme on this card. If he gets those areas in check and just tightens up his technique a little bit more, wow, the sky's the limit for this guy. Because again, I mean, you see what he could do as far as highlight reel finishes. The guy's amazing. So it's always tempting to bet a dog like that could go out there and finish and collect your money right away. But the other side of it, Sadykov's been pretty solid. Now he's got some UFC experience under his belt. I think if he could weather that early storm again, I think he's going to end up finishing McKinney. So tough spot. There's been some two-way action at the sports books here as well. Early on, it was Sadykov, but now we're seeing some love back on McKinney. I think you got to lean towards the Sadykov side a little bit. But again, at the price, it could be about right, if that makes sense, because he should be a slight favorite here, and you got to respect the explosiveness on the McKinney side.
And look at that total, right? 1.5 rounds. It's solid plus money, plus $1.40 if he can just go 7.5 minutes. But if you're watching Terrence McKinney fights, they normally don't go that far. So we'll see how this one plays out come Saturday. Nick, very quickly, tell the people what they get when they check into the Gambler's Perspective.
Well, tomorrow we're going to have the Gambler's Perspective probably on Fight Pass. It'll show up tomorrow evening, so Wednesday evening. But you get all of our best bets, the steam moves. We talk about everything there is to talk about as far as from a betting aspect on tomorrow's show. So make sure to check it out, UFC Fight Pass, the Gambler's Perspective. Get all my best bets for this weekend's card.
And as our conversation is happening right now, the All-Star game tonight, I see that Cleveland Guardians shirt you got on there. There he is, everybody. Follow him on Twitter at Fight Odds, the one and only Nick Kalikas. Come on back, Reed Kuhn next here on First Strike. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for the full terms and conditions. Dave Ross back here at Circuit Sportsbook in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's go out to our nation's capital. He is Reed Kuhn, back off vacation and back in Washington, D.C. And again, you can follow him as I do at Fightnomics on Twitter. But, I was looking at your bio again today, Reed. Sometimes you just take things for granted because, we've done this for a couple of years now. And you have Science Nerd listed in your bio on Twitter. I failed physics. That'll be no surprise to you. How did this love affair with science and numbers and then making it applicable here to the fight game, how did that all come about?
I think that's been from a very early age. My father was a physicist, lots of scientists in the family. And when I got dropped off at college, true story, he literally looked at me and said, you can major in anything that you want as long as you get a degree in physics or engineering. And so I picked physics. But I was the only physics grad in my entire graduating class. So you should have, if you didn't do well in physics, you should have taken it with me because I don't think they could fail me.
Yeah, I needed you back in high school, Reed. This was the only class I ever failed. But, when you did make this, and of course we talked about the book, Fightnomics, it's spectacular. We're still waiting for the sequel, which I'm sure will be coming. To be able to kind of make that change, and again, you've talked about it on the show, how you were basically challenged and said, hey, nobody's done this for data to make this kind of a data-driven sport, and that's where all sports have gone now when you're really taking it seriously. Did you find that an easy correlation for you from kind of physics and science and making it applicable to the fight game?
I went past physics and definitely into what's called the decision sciences. Now I think more relevant would be data science, but I kind of predate that explosion.
Wow.
So just making sense of a system and trying to figure out what is normal and how the pieces fit together, that felt very normal and natural to me, whether you do it with data or with physics. So that was my way of approaching MMA. I didn't know anything about the sport really as a competitor and athlete, so I tried to make sense of it with numbers. And so that's why I've created variables that I think tell a story and help explain things to people that are like me, that are not competing in the cage.
It's absolutely fascinating. I truly do find it fascinating, people that can do what you do with that brain power. I find it fascinating from a viewer's perspective watching the sport as long as I have when I watch somebody like Holm, who's still out there north of 40, still competing at a very high level, still in 2023, headlining an event here on a Saturday night coming up here at UFC Fight Night here in Las Vegas. Now she's got Mayra Bueno Silva in there, and now you've got two fighters, 41 and 31 respectively. You've got tons of data on both women in that cage here come Saturday night. What are the numbers telling you? Because it's just bizarre that you look up and see Holly Holm still almost some places $1.70 favorite, $1.55 we're seeing here at DraftKings. Does the data support that she should still be this sizable favorite?
For me, it does. But I think the reason the prices are staying close is because you see a mismatch in styles where Silva, 4 of her 6 UFC victories have been by submission. And Holly Holm is definitely the boxer. She's the striker. She wants to stay on the feet. And that's how she lost her title, was with wrestling. And so when you put those two things together, people are thinking, all right, well, maybe Holly Holm's past her prime. You got a younger fighter who's a submission specialist. That's a recipe for disaster. I think that's keeping things closer than they otherwise would be. But when I look at it, I'm thinking, hey, Holly Holm has excellent clinch control. She has pretty good takedown defense, and she is really good at long range striking and keeping her distance. And so when you say that if Silva, who doesn't really have offensive wrestling, she just has a submission, she actually lets people take her down to the ground and then she succeeds. Holly Holm is not going to plant her and fight in the guard. I don't see that happening. I see Holly Holm fighting smart, keeping this on the feet, and just picking her apart for 5 rounds. And Holly Holm can still do it for 5 rounds. I know she's over 40. You don't normally see me picking a 40-year-old, but in this case, she's almost like a Clay Guida in between rounds. She's bouncing around, constant output, lots of energy. I think she can go for 5 rounds and just pour on that volume.
Yeah, the fight you're alluding to when she lost that belt, I was there at that night at UFC 196 when she lost to Miesha Tate. She got taken down in the second, and then in the 5th round here, she was dominating that fight in between those 2 takedowns. So again, we see how much it's juiced now to the over 4.5, and that's why I bring up that night back at UFC 196. It feels like correlated plays that if you do like Holly, maybe via decision plus $1.20, do you see finishing potential here? Because if you do, and people want to back the under, they get plus $1.60 if somebody can get a stoppage before we hit 4.5 rounds.
If it's going to be an early stoppage, it's probably because Silva does find some sort of sneaky transition and gets into that knee bar or something slick. I just don't really see that happening. I don't see Holm getting caught on the ground or from the clinch. She's the bigger, stronger fighter, I think, and she's gonna fight smart. I mean, she's been in the Jackson camp forever. She knows that she has a game plan, and it's to stay out of danger, and she can do that, I think. So that's why I'm leaning over and Holm. Now, I wouldn't be averse to a late finish via strikes because we haven't really seen Silva in the late rounds. We don't know if her cardio is going to hold up, if Holm is really pouring it on. But a safe play might, if I'm going with Holm, is Holm and the over 2.5 or something like that. If you want to do a DraftKings single game parlay.
When I look back, and again, you go back to the head kick heard around the world, certainly in Melbourne that night when she beat Ronda Rousey way back when. Is the data showing that those days are gone from Holly Holm? You mentioned maybe a late stoppage. Has she become a volume puncher and striker, and not necessarily that's going to look for a couple punches and a head kick to knock out her opponent?
She's definitely a volume striker, and that's the way she fights. Her knockdown rate technically is below average. She only has 2 career knockdowns. One of them was Ronda Rousey. But she does throw a lot of head kicks, and if you land one of those cleanly, I don't care if you're a volume striker, you're still going to hurt someone, especially late in the game when people start dropping their hands. So if she's really wearing on Silva, she could land something late because she does like to throw those head kicks. She has that kind of in her back pocket. And if that comes out late, that could really do some damage. But early on, I don't see it piling up, in less than 2.5 rounds. That's why I would lean over 2.5. But, I get real squirrely about trying to thread the needle in there in the later rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, take that for the data that it shows there. I'm with you on that. It does feel like Holly Holm, if she can get that lead on the cards, hits the cards, but you always have to hold your breath, too, when it hits the cards these days. When you go to the co-main event here, Albert Durev against Jung Young Park, we're seeing Park right now as a small favorite, kind of very similar to what we're seeing in the main event with Holly Holm. $1.55 for Park. The comeback in Albert right now is $1.35. What's the data showing on you and 2 guys now north of 30 that I'm sure you've got plenty of?
Yeah, it's some data. I mean, Park, we've got a little bit more than Duraev, and his record is very impressive. But there's a lot more give and take in this one. So while I agree that Park is a slight favorite or should be a slight favorite, I'm not sure if there's much value in his current price. If anything, depending on where the prices go, I might end up with a tiny stab on Duraev. But really, I just think this goes over because you have two guys that are competent on the ground. They both like to grapple, so I don't think either one of them is going to get caught unsuspecting with a submission. But neither one of them has a knockdown, and if this plays out in both levels, I just see a lot of stalemates, positional stalemates, not a lot of threatening submissions, and so that's why I think this goes the over. And you're actually going to get better value than going with Park straight up.
I love that play there. So again, minus $1.40 for over 2.5 rounds. Again, if you think the fight's going to go the distance, even smaller without picking a winner at $1.35. And sometimes I think, Reed, you've done a great job there trying to find the value. If the value's not in the side, certainly look to the total, and that could be where you should make your play there. You got the big ticket back in here, Walt Harris. We know it's been the road less traveled to get back into the octagon. A lot of issues away from the octagon had been well documented against Josh Brazen here. What do you make of Walt being inserted as a $1.65 favorite for a guy that's now 40 and we haven't seen in quite some time?
I think at heavyweight, this is the only weight class where you could actually pull that off, be out of the cage for that long. He doesn't even have a win this decade. Keep in mind, his last win was like pre-pandemic. And so Walt Harris, yeah, he's got big knockout power. But if you look at his record, when he doesn't get that knockout in the first round, he generally does not do well if the fight goes on into the second and third round. And so Parisian, while he doesn't really leap off the page on paper in terms of dominant skill, he doesn't have a lot of knockdown power. He's a little bit more of an eager wrestler, perhaps. I'll give him that, although he doesn't have dominant control. But he could just weather that storm. And when you have someone over 40 who's been out of the cage that long, this is one of those rare fights. I might actually pay attention to the weigh-ins because if Harris doesn't come in looking really sharp, you got to wonder what he's got. Is he here for the paycheck? They're not giving him the toughest opponent. It's not like this isn't really a compelling matchup for a lot of reasons. But the numbers anyway, if you're using some recency or some if you create a timeline of what fights would actually qualify to analyze for performance, you can't go much farther back than 5 or 6 years, or I wouldn't recommend it. And when you're going back that far, yeah, you see Harris knocking people out. He's got excellent power, but not lately. And that's what's affecting my analysis. And I think it's leaning towards Parisian, or at least more of a coin flip, and therefore take the volume. So that's why this is a tricky matchup. I'll have to see where the prices land, but I'm also going to pay attention to weigh-ins. Yeah,
it's fascinating, too, because you look at the total here, just 1.5, and for over 1.5 rounds, minus $1.10. Hey, you think correlated plays, but that might not be the case if Walt Harris doesn't have a whole lot in the gas tank here come Saturday night. So it'll be fascinating to see from that perspective if he is in condition. So this might be one of those times that you do look and see what type of shape is the big ticket in as he gets back inside of that octagon. Very quickly, you mentioned something too when you're looking at value. Very quickly, if you don't find that value, certainly in the numbers here for the side, do you look to the total or just say sometimes it's going to be a pass if I can't find it?
Sometimes seeing no value in a price means it's more evenly matched than we think. And that might say, hey, this is probably going to be a closely contested fight. Maybe we should go the over.
All right. So sometimes that's why you might want to look if you don't find that value, certainly in the side. Reed, appreciate you as always, my friend. Come on back. We're going to go to Chicago next with Jordan Sherwood on First Strike. It is always football season here at VSiN, which is why we've already released our NFL betting guide. The guide's going to get you ready for the upcoming NFL season with in-depth profiles of every team, including advanced stats, proven betting systems, proprietary betting trends, plus best bets on season win totals, futures, and props. Become a VSiN Pro subscriber today for as low as $19. Get your digital copy of the VSiN NFL betting guide, or take advantage of our summer kickoff special. Get access to everything we do through the Super Bowl for only $175. You can sign up today at VSiN.com/subscribe. Jordan Sherwood's getting ready for football season. You can follow him on Twitter, as I do, at Wood on ESPN 1000. Does a great job for Fat Jack Sports, and also the host of the Unnamed MMA podcast at ESPN. Jordan, before we get into the card, I see you've got your Bears pin on today. Is the city going crazy for Justin Fields? Is that what this is all about now? It's just about Justin Fields and what he looks like in year 3?
Well, no, I mean, it's a little bit of that. It's also obviously the weapons that have been added to around him with DJ Moore coming over from Carolina. They're anticipating the drafts, the people that they drafted this year to mature, or, the rookies to mature in the next level. But probably more importantly, both baseball teams suck. So let's move on to football, where maybe there's some hope for this football team come this season.
And I love that you keep it real in the second city there with what's going on in baseball. They're on to football. We're back on to the UFC, obviously. We never slow down here at First Strike. Holly Holm doesn't seem like she's slowing down at 41 years young. Mayra Bueno Silva, we know at 31, she'd like to get this fight down to the ground. Potentially 5 rounds in this main event. Jordan Sherwood, how do you see this fight breaking out?
Yeah, is she going to be able to do that? Because, even though that Holly Holm continues to get older, she still has unbelievable takedown defense. She's able to dictate where these fights go. She's working fights more in the clinch. She's not as, doesn't have as much volume as she once did, but she still understands footwork, understands timing and distance. And look, she's only been submitted one time in her mixed martial arts career, and that's when she lost the Bantamweight championship to Miesha Tate in that 5-round war where Tate got the submission in the 5th round when both women were basically spent, and it was a last-second submission attempt for Miesha Tate. So I'd be very surprised if Bueno Silva is able to get this fight to the ground and get Holly Holm to a submission. The way that Bueno Silva is going to have to win this fight is that she's going to have to land the more powerful strikes. And obviously that's a big task against a fighter like Holly Holm, as well as asking Bueno Silva to do that, as you mentioned, her background in jiu-jitsu. But that is how Holly Holm is losing fights now. That's how she lost to Ketlin Vieira. That's how she lost to Cyborg. It's not that she's not outworking her opponent. She is. It's just some more of the significant strikes are being landed by her opponent. I don't see that as a big of an issue against an opponent by Mayra Bueno Silva, but I do believe the safer play, Dave, is in a typical Holly Holm fight, a 5-round fight, point fights, who's going to land the bigger strikes. So the over is what I'm pointing to. The over is my confident play for this fight that I don't think we see a finish.
It's interesting. You mentioned all those strikers. I was there in Chicago, Octagon side, when she lost to Valentina Shevchenko, the same way you're describing, Jordan, right? She actually got outstruck. And so for the fight to go the distance here, instead of laying the $1.95 on 4.5 rounds, would you just, without picking a winner, would you look at the fight prop to go the distance at minus $1.65, which is essentially where Holly Holm is finding herself, depending on which book you see. That's almost where how big a favorite she is. Is that the better play, is go $1.65 that the fight just hits the cards?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I mentioned the Vieira fight, and a lot of people were upset about that decision. Vieira landed the significant strikes, and we've seen this time and time again. We've talked about this on First Strike. There's a lot of fights now, like judges are weighing the significant strikes a lot more. And in case of point, the fight against Raquel Pennington, which Holly Holm won, like she was landing and controlling the fight a little bit more against the cage. So I think with her style, the fact that Bueno Silva is going to try and hunt for that takedown, likely not be successful in getting it, or if she does, I doubt she'll be able to submit Holly Holm, which is why I would favor judges' scorecards being rendered in the main event on Saturday night.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down there. It seems like a very astute observation, probably the better value play there of laying the $1.65 that it hits the cards. What about in the co-main event here? When I look at Durev against Park, and Park right now about the same size favorite as Holly Holm, about $1.55 here. Is Albert being undervalued here, plus $1.35 to come back here in the Challenger?
I'm not so sure about that. I really like the Iron Turtle. I think that his game plan, it'll be a similar game plan that Duraev, we've seen from him, guy that looks to get the takedown, put some pressure. I just worry about Duraev's cardio. We saw him kind of fade a little bit against Joaquin Buckley. Granted, Joaquin Buckley hits with a tremendous amount of power, not the same that you're going to get from the Iron Turtle. But I do believe just the pace is going to be the determining factor. Plus the fact, too, that the Iron Turtle really doesn't get finished. And when he does, it's been, by superior grapplers. So I just like straight up, it's kind of a mirror image of each other. I view this kind of as a virtual pick'em, but I think, what I've liked what I've seen, especially this win streak that the Iron Turtle is on. I think 3 fights in a row now for him. Derive's not going to bring anything that Park has not seen before. So that's why I like him just straight up to win the fight. I'm not going to get cute with a finish or judges scorecards. I just think that the Derive has impressed me enough in his wins. Certainly Park has in his 3-fight win streak.
If you like the fight to hit the cards on this one again, minus $1.35 there for potentially a 3-round fight. Josh Parisian in there against Walt Harris. The big ticket is back. He is the favorite here. It's really hard to judge which version of Walt Harris we're going to see now at 40 years young. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, obviously we could understand if he wasn't right during that 3-fight losing streak that he had. Obviously the murder of his stepdaughter had to be on his mind. Maybe he came back a little bit more. And perhaps now, that case has kind of resolved itself. They found the guy that did it. He's going to be convicted. And maybe Walt Harris is right. He still surrounds himself with the right people, the right gym. And what I'm relying on is that, yes, he is right. He's just going to use his athleticism, his power, which is going to be a little bit too much for Josh Parisian to handle. Josh Parisian has had success against guys that he's been able to out athletic or, just have a wandering pace against. That's not going to be the case against a guy as explosive as Walt Harris, even though he's a little bit older in age, as you alluded to. I still think that we're going to see a vintage performance by the big ticket. Now, look, I don't want to associate death with these themes, but we saw it once before. Mark Hominick came back after Sean. Now I'm losing the touch of his head coach, but he came back against Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, and just tried to be a bat out of hell right out of that fight. And he ran into a right hand of the Korean Zombie. I don't think Walt Harris will act like that. He's a little bit cerebral in his attack. I like him to win, but you can't weigh the emotions. The emotions do certainly get the best of us at times, but I think Walt Harris is going to come ready, be prepared, and get the win.
I'm with you, though. Talked to Walt numerous times through the years. You feel for the guy on a human level that you detailed there. You hope as much as you can try to put back just a horrific event on the back burner to get back to the profession side of things. It is a big ask, but I'm with you. I think most of MMA fans are certainly feeling for Walt Harris as he gets back in there on Saturday.
Sean Tompkins, by the way.
Sean Tompkins.
That's striking coach.
It always comes back, yeah. Let's get to a fight that you're going to take. I love the way you phrase this. Going to take a flyer on Tyson Nam. Now, he's a big dog here, 3-1 underdog here on one of the earlier fights of the evening against Azat Maksum. Why do you think that right now Tyson might be worth that value play?
Because, look, we've seen Tyson Nam have success, against other fighters before. I believe this is going to be a striking matchup. There's not a lot of, information about his opponent. Obviously, he comes from a regional scene. He's unbeaten, so you got to respect a guy that's undefeated. Brave CF is a reputable promotion that he came from. But, Tyson Nam is going to get into a kickboxing match, and he's a very, fluid striker. Been around the block before, not going to be intimidated by some guy's record and what he's been doing. So, I at 4-1, Tyson Nam is certainly worth a flyer here on a Tuesday, going in against a guy making his UFC debut.
I certainly like that angle a lot. Got about 90 seconds to go. I don't know that they'll pull your card if you don't take Terrence McKinney against Nassim Sadikov here. But what do you make of Terrence back in there? He's been a highlight film sometimes on the right side and certainly a couple times on the wrong side.
Yeah, is he? Look, he's good for a round and a half. He's got power that he carries into those first, those first couple of minutes of the fight. We've seen him blitz guys before, overwhelm them before. I think he could certainly do that as well. Obviously, Sadikov is a guy that's going to bring the fight to him, but a guy that also, has been knocked out before. Hasn't been in the UFC. It happened on the regional scene. But bottom line for me is I think we're going to get a fireworks. I think we're going to get a finish. Either we're going to get a vintage McKinney early in the fight, or Sadikov's going to be able to land something midway through the fight into that third round and get McKinney out of there.
30 seconds to go. Tell the peeps what they get when they check out the Unnamed MMA podcast.
Yeah, we like to have a Chicago theme. We don't break down the Bears, but we do talk about all the fights for the UFC. We will recap UFC 290, which was obviously a fantastic card, and preview this fight night, give you a couple of our selections via the Fat Jack.
Jordan, always great to have you on, my friend. Hold it down there in summertime in Chicago, one of the best times of the year, maybe the best time of the year to be in the great city of Chicago. Appreciate you as always. When we come back, going to go to Boston with Dan Vreeland next here on First Strike. Back here on First Strike, Dave Ross in Las Vegas. Let's go out to Boston to catch up with Dan Vreeland, writer at Gambling Podcast, Cage Side Press, and host of Top Turtle MMA and SGPN MMA Podcast. Dan, great to have you back. Before we talk about this card, very quickly, Francis Ngannou, the former heavyweight champion of the world, at least in the UFC, leaves the organization, and now he's going to fight Tyson Fury in a legit boxing match with the Queen's rules, apparently. We've been kind of kicking around a little bit before we came on here. What are they going to say now, right? Like, Francis is going to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, he won. Like you can say what you wanted to him beforehand about, oh, he's going to be fighting bums at PFL or, oh, legacy this or legacy that. But, you know, we talked about Conor McGregor solidifying his legacy when he fought Floyd Mayweather, and he lost that fight. But we said, you know, he held his own. He did what he was supposed to. And even if Floyd carried him or whatever, regardless of what happens in this fight, you know, he could go out and get knocked out in the first round. Wouldn't matter to me. The dude found his way into one of the biggest boxing matches of all time. And at the same time as having his cake and eating it too in a PFL. So, yeah, I couldn't be happier for him too.
It does, because you're right. We still talk about Conor McGregor against Floyd Mayweather, and decades from now, they'll talk about Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou no matter what happens when that actually happens. Wow. Okay, Holly Holm, is still happening, which is kind of amazing here in 2023. She is 41 years young, and she just keeps on going. She's got so much energy inside that octagon, but yet now, 10 years her junior, here comes Mayra Bueno Silva, who's trying to look at Holm, I think, as a potential stepping stone to a title shot here. What do you make of Holly being still as a solid favorite at $1.55?
I can't believe she's not a bigger favorite. You know, like, not that Mayra Bueno Silva has gone out there and done the thing. You know, I think she's got 3 wins in a row. I don't think she's been beat at Bantamweight in the UFC. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at a lot of those fights, you know, look at the one with Lena Landsberg. Landsberg really looked like she was like 1 foot out the door. The takedown attempts are sloppy. Like, I just don't think she's going to be able to have that kind of success with Holly Holm, because say what you want about Holly Holm, but she's still extremely strong in the clinch. She still has great distance management. She works well from range. You know, that's always been her best trait, right? She's been able to kickbox from range. And she's way faster than Mayra Bueno Silva. I just, apart from Mayra Bueno Silva catching her in a submission during some sort of grappling exchange, I don't know how Mayra wins this fight. She's not going to control Holly. She's not going to outstrike her. I think the fact that we're seeing Holly Holm at the number of that is really lucky.
Dan, when you look at now, obviously it's juiced heavily to the over at $1.95 for 4.5, because that's the way Holly in her advancing age, she's become more of that decision type fighter, but yet she could still certainly win that way. If this fight stays standing, could she get a stoppage against Bueno Silva here? TKO, KO, or do you think it would more than likely be by the cards?
I think it's probably by the cards. Granted, it is 5 rounds, so that certainly changes things. But, you know, we saw Mayra Bueno Silva stand in exchange with Manol Fiorot for 3 rounds before. And don't get me wrong, she got the worst end of every single one of those exchanges, and she got 10-8'd in the 3rd round. But at the same time, like, I don't know that she was ever in danger of being knocked out. She does some smart things defensively. Ultimately, I think that probably hinders her offense in some places. But I don't really see her being able to, or Holly Holm rather, being able to knock her out. And I don't see her going for it either. I think she's going to find a lot of success in the clinch, a lot of success up against the cage. And I think she's just going to ride that to a rather boring decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's probably the game plan, though. You're right, is get her up against the cage and control her there. Plus $1.20 if you do like Holly Holm via decision. Let's stay with the ladies' theme here. Talk about Norma Dumont against Chelsea Chandler here. Fight I have not discussed yet here on First Strike, but I want to get your thoughts on it because it's almost similarly priced here. Dumont, small favorite, $1.40. Chandler in the comeback, plus $1.20. What do you make of this potential 3-round matchup here in the featherweight division?
I'm kind of leaning Chelsea Chandler on this one. I think there's a huge, variable bar here when it comes to this fight because, to be fair, we don't have a lot of data on Chelsea Chandler. We've seen one fight of her in the UFC, a couple of them in Invicta and in the regional scene and whatnot. But what I've seen from her in those times is a lot of aggression. She comes from that Diaz camp. She's got the 209 that she signs her autographs with and all that good stuff. And she really fights like a Diaz brother when it comes to her striking. She gets in your face, she pushes a pace, and she can keep that pace for 15 minutes, and she can keep that pace for longer than 15 minutes. I think the problem we've seen with Norma Dumont so far is that she takes her foot off the gas, right? That Aspen Ladd fight, as boring as it was, and largely to Aspen Ladd's fault more than it was to Dumont's fault, Dumont just was like, whatever, I'll throw 6 punches as long as, she only throws 4 this round. And I don't think she'll have that option here. I think we're going to see Chandler get in her face. And as long as Chandler defends the takedowns, I think getting the dog money here on Chandler is pretty smart.
And Amanda Nunes, with her retirement, they're looking for new blood in the featherweight division. This could be a showcase fight for both these ladies here right now. Again, it is juiced heavily to the over 2.5 rounds, minus 240. Do you see finishing potential, or do you think this one ultimately goes to the cards?
I think Chandler could finish Dumont.
Okay.
I don't think Dumont will finish Chandler. So, if you're looking to play Dumont here, I think Dumont by decision is the only way that she wins this fight. But I could see Chandler finishing her. She throws real heavy when she starts to find her range. We saw that in Invicta where she started landing, and man, did she start landing hard. We saw it against Stephanie Ager. She really started to pour it on when she got on top. So, if Dumont tires the way that I kind of think she will, I think there's maybe a 50-50 chance we see Chandler finish. But I think if you're on Dumont, play her by decision. Let's
stay with the ladies' theme here and go to the very first fight on the card here. And Ashley Evans Smith against Aylin Perez. Perez right now, minus $1 favorite here. If you like Ashley here, the comeback's plus $1.60. Again, a fight that we're expecting potentially, at least via the odds, to go the distance here. Over 2.5 right now, juiced at minus $1.90. What do you make of this first fight of the night?
Well, I think it's extremely hard to handicap somebody who I thought was retired because that's where Ashley Evans Smith was. I thought she was gone. I'll be honest with you. And then to see her up against somebody in Aylin Perez who, looked very lackluster in her first fight. She looked like she certainly was not living up to the hype that we thought she was going to. So here's what I'll say. I think if the Ashley Evans Smith that was around 3 years ago comes out, I think she smashes Aylin Perez. We saw her up against Norma Dumont, the aforementioned Norma Dumont. She hit a head and arm throw. She did wind up losing in some of those scrambles with Norma Dumont, but she was hitting throws and getting the beginnings to takedowns and stuff like that. And we saw Aylin Perez just give up takedown after takedown after takedown against Stephanie Ager and have no idea, didn't know what to do off of her back. So I think if we see that same Ashley Evans Smith, the one who, has looked good in her wrestling and wrestling seems to be her forte, I think she should be able to control, but I think then the big question is it worth the juice here? Is it worth going after her when she's been gone for as long as she hasn't? And like I said, I thought she was retired.
Shame on me for not asking right off the top the fight that you can't wait to wager on, and certainly just the one that you want to watch. Is there a fight on this card that you say, forget about the numbers, I just can't wait to see this fight?
Yeah, Melky Costa versus Austin Lingo is the big one for me. And it's mostly the reason I'm just staying away from it is because Melky Costa is a big favorite in that fight. And I was a little surprised to see that. I thought it was going to be Pick'em because, look, Austin Lingo went in there and banged with Nate the Train Landwehr the last time he fought. And Melky Costa put in a darn good effort on very short notice for his first fight in the UFC, too. You got to love the shoot the box guys. You got to love that they get in people's face. And as we saw with Lingo against Landwehr, Lingo's game for that kind of fight. So I think you're going to see these two just throwing down.
When you talk about big favorites on this card, we look at Moxham here. Azad is a big favorite against Tyson Nam. And I got some thoughts here from Jordan Sherwood on this fight. I want to get yours as well. What do you make of Tyson Nam right now over a $3 betting underdog?
Man, it's so hard with these guys debuting, and especially when they haven't been fighting the highest of level of competition. He's been fighting in Octagon, which is a promotion out of Europe. They fight in Germany sometimes. They fight in the Czech Republic. And I'll be honest, I've watched a couple of his fights over there to get a good line here. I think his wrestling plays high enough that he should just be able to take down and dominate Tyson Nam. Because Tyson Nam, let's face it, he's always been a big power puncher, and that's it. For the most part, power puncher or bust. And that makes him extremely fun to watch, but sometimes tough to bet on. I think he should probably get taken down regularly. But at, at plus 300, the puncher's chance is there. And I mean, it's one of the best numbers on the card. This is such like a tightly lined card, top to bottom. So, if you're looking for a lottery ticket, you could do a lot worse than Tyson Nam. And to be honest, I'm not wagering negative 400 on a guy, who I've seen a handful of times out of Europe.
Very quickly, got about 30 seconds ago. Evan Elder is also a big favorite, almost a $3 betting favorite against Gennaro Valdez. Should he be that big a favorite?
Yeah, I think so. He absolutely worked Nazim Sadikov in their fight. He was up 2-0 easy before he wound up getting cut on the forehead. I think they gave him a huge step down in competition here. He looks good on the feet. I think he'll have a wrestling advantage. That one's priced just right around where I like it.
All right, my mom always says you talk really fast, and she loves it because I talk fast too. So you got 15 seconds. What fight do you think is the best value fight to wager on?
Oh, Terrence McKinney over Nazim Sadikov. The guy's got bombs. Let him drop them.
All right, Chicago is back if T-Mac can get that victory come Saturday. Dan, appreciate you as always, my friend. Enjoy the fights. We'll catch up again next week. Thanks, everybody, for watching this edition of First Strike. Enjoy the fights. We'll see you next week right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.